Hello. Well, now this is the 6th anniversary of me living in Ukraine and the Ukrainian Revolution, also known as Euromaidan. In this video, I'm going to explain what has changed before and after that fateful event. And the title of my video is The Enemy's Apathy. Okay, so 100 plus people are dead. The interim skeleton government is in place, and all of downtown Kiev is burnt and in smokes and flames and tents and all that stuff. So what is next? I actually took some of these photos myself to show you what it was like. The first thing that I think that changed is that, it's going to sound a little cheesy, but the air of fear sort of vanished. There was a feeling of optimism and that maybe we're all going to get out of this alive, and perhaps we have the power in our hand once again. The actual revolution was a period of time with lots of emotion, lots of uncertainty, and lots of propaganda, unfortunately. And there was all kinds of propaganda from all sides. I mean, there was a photo where Yanukovych's the Party of Regions, actually had a poster in every single metro station with signs that association to EU means gay marriage. Well, it means the acceptance of gay marriage, rather. And I don't know where they got that conclusion, but okay. I mean, in order for Ukraine to sign the association agreement, we have to first pass legislation that we accept gay marriage, which is completely false. And again, during the annexation of Crimea, there was this movement that perhaps some politicians could actually get it back. There was this overall feeling of anger and helplessness across this country, and there was this little desire to feel any optimism. And this is especially, I think, hurt the pensioners and the seniors and an older generation that has lived through the Soviet Union, and this is all they know, and now they kind of seen the world just collapse, and they obviously did find it difficult to accept the new era of where the country would be going, I think. So the first thing that I've noticed, I suppose, is that there was a lot of this, something that I like to call stressful optimism. And what I mean by that is like, it's tons of stress, but there's a little bit of optimism in the end. I'm gonna explain what I mean by that. To put it into perspective, over 2 years, I think that was between 2014 and 2016, the GDP of Ukraine has shrank by 23%. I mean, that is how much that Greece has shrank over a decade that they were in this hole. And I remember there was a time when there was like a literal run on flour. And I don't know how and why it happened, but there was this panic in the winter of 2015 where people just like grabbed like mountains and mountains of flour and like buckwheat and all that kind of stuff. And it was difficult not to feel some sort of uneasiness, right? Officials advised citizens of Kiev to use the city's metro in case of a Russian attack or an aerial bombardment that would take place. And this was the early period of the war where the army was on its knees pretty much, and everyday Ukrainians rose up, filled the ranks of regular civilian or whatnot battalions, and a lot of like even more volunteers actually sprung up to deliver food and supplies to the front lines, which was also ridiculous in my opinion. I've never seen something like this happen. And but me living my day-to-day life, right, I was going to the metro to get to work, and I was thinking, well, what if bombs really do start flying? What if like a terrorist does blow up this station? What would happen? I mean, this feeling was kind of like followed me every day, day in, day out. They were not really unfounded feelings because, like, the front line was not that far away. You had whole cities of Donetsk, Luhansk, and dozens, if not hundreds, of different little cities, towns that were also caught in the crossfire, where this was actually happening. Like, their buildings were being blown up. People were like stepping on mines and like had like arms blown off and all that kind of stuff. So, well, where does the optimism come in? Well, I suppose it's an uncomfortable feeling, of course, but in the end, I think everybody was sort of at peace with themselves because they thought that they were going on the right path. Yes, it's a painful path for Ukraine, but it's the right path. And why? Because, well, the rest of the civilized world is behind us. The world is supporting us, and we have no other choice but to do this. Another thing that I've noticed, there was a lot less Russian influence in Ukraine, like very immediately. I mean, suppose that I noticed this practically right away after 2014. Quick disappearance of Russian products in supermarkets. I mean, when I was there in 2012, I noticed that, for example, the vodka section would be half of that would be Russian. If you went to the mineral water section, half of it would be Russian. Pretty much everything processed, a lot of it was Russian. And that Russian stuff wasn't really so bad. I mean, they make some pretty good mineral water and vodka probably, but crackers and candies that were like had this Soviet revival theme where they had like hammer and sickle on it, and all of that kind of stuff also disappeared. And the bar or restaurant, a little cafe, it had a TV, like a flat screen TV playing music videos. It all disappeared, and in its place we've got English music videos. Any Soviet-themed event or product ended up being taboo quickly, right? And things like Soviet insignia, all that kind of stuff. And any sort of reference of Ukrainian accomplishments during the Soviet times were, well, I wouldn't say downplayed, but the Soviet element was completely removed. I didn't have any connections with the Russian business world, but a lot of Russian businesses left, and Ukrainian companies that dealt with Russian businesses, which was the majority of the time, also had to readjust and pivot away from that and find new clients, which again, one of the reasons why Ukraine has suffered such drastic economic losses was because of that. Another thing that really caught my attention was that the blatant lawlessness just disappeared, went away. Beforehand, there was this constant, this like carelessness, disregard for the law, with people doing whatever they wanted, especially the people in a higher classes, with elite class that had the money and the ability to pay off whatever they were doing. Police did stop you, like nothing really would stop them from fabricating a charge, demand bribe from you, any amount at all, and extort you on a spot for whatever, detain you, that kind of stuff. It seemed that there was a selective law in place, and it didn't apply to certain people, again, if they had money. Like, for example, my life is better than yours, my time is worth more than your time. It really manifested itself in the way people treated each other on the road. I mean, for example, I've seen this myself in 2012. I was walking around downtown Kiev, and like this was rush hour, like traffic is gridlocked. But no, now there's a presidential motorcade that had to drive. I suppose Yanukovych with his buddies or whatever, and they stopped the traffic for good like 15 to 20 minutes while like 3 or 4 cars had to go by. Another thing that was very prevalent is that cars cutting into the oncoming lane to pass everybody else. Like, so you're sitting in a traffic jam, but no, this one guy is gonna go on the driving onto the oncoming traffic if the lane is free and just pass everybody. And I've seen this numerous times a day, actually. People will also go and driving on the shoulder, driving off-road, that kind of stuff. The worst part of all this probably is when an ambulance was there, right? Nobody would let an ambulance through. And this is also like crazy. I also remember a story of a friend that was stopped by police, and he told me the story that he had like a big bill, and he needed change, but the cop wanted a bribe. So the cop actually went to his car and gave that guy change, which like I wonder how that played out. Like I wonder how that looked at. What else has changed is that there's a lot more interest in the English language. And if you were to ask anybody who was an expat back in 2010 to 2013 or so, it was really difficult to make friends there, and it was easy to feel alone, especially since you pretty much needed Russian or Ukrainian to get around, to get things done. And this has really changed. I think in 2014, the President Poroshenko, there was like public service announcement, learn English, and I thought it was kind of funny, but it happened. But in the end, it did bring about some results, especially since Ukraine did get visa-free travel with Europe. And the result was a remarkable one. I mean, right now in Ukraine, I think anybody who's around the ages of between 20 and 30, they're probably gonna, in big cities, of course, in Kiev, they're probably gonna speak English. The amount of international companies in Kiev also helps with that. There's a lot of work for people who speak English. And if I had to guess, I think a good maybe 25% of young people, I would say, speak English. I'm just a guess. Another thing that I noticed is a sad reality was that war became more visible. It became more in your face. It's a never-present topic that's everywhere. And this is a depressing consequence, of course. But war, even though it's far away, for many Ukrainian cities felt close, because many neighborhoods, especially like smaller towns and smaller cities, you would have huge groups of people who lost like a brother or like a son or a neighbor or somebody like that. Almost everybody knew somebody who lost somebody, and it wasn't uncommon to meet people who actually knew dozens of people like that. It was this ever-present thing that followed you everywhere. And there was this constant reminder of the fact, because I went to Kiev Oblast once and went to a small town, and I was in a taxi, and basically I was driving around that town, and everybody was everyone was driving slow in front of us, and the taxi driver said, "Oh, this young man about 19 years old, the second one this week," and I was like, "Wow, this is crazy." And basically, obviously, there was a crowd up ahead, and they're following a cart that was carrying his coffin. I suppose the more this feeling persisted, the more you realize that how important this is for Ukraine to continue. It's a sense of statehood and identity that they're fighting for, really. And to touch on that, I suppose because I interacted with some border control officials and some migration service officials, I kind of got the idea that their attitude changed a lot from the Yanukovych time. Obviously, they started giving biometric passports away, and there was lots of investment into training, into workflow improvements, into the process improvements that I think also has changed their behavior, which is a great thing. In conclusion, I would say that as a consequence of this war and the panic-stricken population, the purchasing power of Ukrainians has dropped dramatically. So in a way, everybody became a lot poorer. So that's the biggest change that I've noticed. And even those with money weren't sure which way the situation will turn. Should they spend something? Should they buy something for themselves? And the fact that young Ukrainians were dying every day on the front lines made everybody a little bit guilty about spending money. It further complicated, I suppose, the moral situation of spending money. But in a bittersweet twist, there was a lot of optimism for the future. So this really wasn't an unfounded reality. Another thing that I suppose was a positive thing out of all of this is that Ukraine became more unified as a country, and everybody did become more unified. I mean, people were more or less, they started understanding how and where and why of where they stood in terms of Russia, in terms of Europe, in terms of United States, well, whatever. They understood where they stood from. Everybody had an opinion about it, whereas before, somebody's opinion would probably be made for them, especially in the case of eastern and southern Ukraine. The fragmentation of the different regions kind of disappeared, dissipated, and what you've seen was more unity in the country. For lack of a better word, I think it was a lack of the identity that was corrected. Now, everybody seemed to have a better idea of what it really actually means to be Ukrainian, which I think is a great outcome regardless. So I hope you found this video interesting, and I hope I kind of explained in detail of what it was like to live in Ukraine during 2014, 2015, 2016. And a number of years, of course, after the Maidan Revolution, or the Ukrainian Revolution as it's also known. So again, it's unlike any other experience I've ever had in my life. To drive home the point is that the importance of having an opinion and the responsibility of having that opinion is what I've realized was so important. You cannot be apathetic, right? Because being apathetic and being, in a way, a sheep is what Ukrainians think is that's what Russia's all about. I mean, and we're not like that. We Ukrainians, we're not sheep. And I think that is what made the war effort so much more real and actual and brought up a lot of value for Ukraine as a nation. I'm not saying that, a Ukrainian is shooting a Russian or another Ukrainian. It's a war, in a way, between an apathetic person and a person that understands and knows what they stand for. So anyway, on that note, I hope you like this video, and hit like, subscribe if you like it, and I'll see you in the next one.